They shaved her head in the middle of the town square. Men spat at her feet. Women screamed the word traitor. Children were forced to watch. Her crime. She fell in love with the enemy. But here's what no one could ever prove. In the summer of 1943, in a small occupied village in France during World War II, whispers spread faster than gunfire. They said she was seen near the river at night. They said a German officer visited her house after curfew. They said she betrayed her country. What they didn't know was what really happened the night he died, because the truth was buried with him. His name was Captain Lucas Reinhardt, an officer of the Wehrmacht, disciplined, decorated, untouchable, until someone put a bullet in him and threw his body into the river. Official reports blamed the French resistance, but there was something strange. No witnesses, no surviving attackers, no clear timeline, and one terrified young woman who refused to speak. Her name was Elise Martin. She was 22 years old when the German army occupied her village. 22 when soldiers began marching through streets she once crossed barefoot as a child. 22 when survival became more important than pride. And 22 when she met the man she was supposed to hate. Was she naive, manipulated, or did she make a choice that would cost her everything? Because here's the part history doesn't like to talk about. War creates enemies, but it also creates impossible intimacy, loneliness, fear, proximity, and sometimes love. Did she warn him that the resistance was coming? Did she betray the resistance to save him, or did he sacrifice himself to protect her? No official record answers those questions. All that remains is a single letter found on her doorstep the morning his body surfaced. One sentence. If loving you is betrayal, then let history judge me. And history did judge her, publicly, brutally, without mercy. But what if the entire village was wrong? What if the traitor was the only one brave enough to love across enemy lines? Tonight, we're stepping into a story most people would rather simplify, because it's easier to divide the world into heroes and villains. It's harder to accept that in war. The heart doesn't follow borders. And before we uncover what truly happened between a French girl and a German officer, make sure you subscribe. Because on this channel, we don't just tell war stories, we reveal the human one's history tried to silence. Now let me take you back to the night the gunshots echoed across the river, and a forbidden love became a death sentence. Before we go any further into this forbidden love story, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Here we uncover the hidden romances, impossible choices, and untold human stories behind World War II. If you're fascinated by the emotional side of history, the love, betrayal, and sacrifices history books rarely mention, subscribe now and become part of this journey. When the Germans arrived in her village, they didn't come screaming. They came organized, precise, efficient, boots striking stone in perfect rhythm, trucks rolling in before sunrise, orders nailed to doors before breakfast. By noon, the French flag was gone. By evening, fear had replaced it. Elise watched it all from behind the lace curtain of her father's house. She remembered thinking how strange it was that something so violent could feel so quiet. Occupation didn't begin with explosions. It began with silence. Shops emptied within weeks. Bread grew thinner. Conversations grew shorter. Neighbors stopped trusting neighbors. The air itself felt monitored. And then there were the soldiers. Most were young, some arrogant, some frightened, all armed. Captain Lucas Reinhardt stood apart from them. Not louder, not crueler, just colder. He spoke French fluently, though with a controlled accent. He followed regulations with mechanical discipline. He didn't drink publicly. He didn't flirt carelessly. That's what made him more dangerous. The first time he truly noticed Elise wasn't romantic. It was defiance. 2 soldiers had entered her father's workshop accusing him of hiding rationed supplies. One overturned a crate. The other shoved an old man with a war-scarred limp. Elise stepped between them. No weapon, no plan, just fury. For a moment, even the soldiers hesitated. That's when Reinhardt entered. He assessed the scene in seconds, asked for documentation, found none, ordered his men out. No apology, no softness, just control. But when he turned to leave, his eyes met hers, and something shifted. Not desire, recognition. She didn't look away. Days later, he returned alone. not as a captain conducting inspection, as a man holding a small brown parcel. Medicine, hard to find, impossible to afford. For your father, he said. She should have slammed the door. Instead, she asked the question that would change everything. Why? He didn't answer immediately, because even he didn't fully understand. Maybe it was the way she refused to be afraid. Maybe it was exhaustion from playing the role of occupier. Maybe it was loneliness wearing a uniform. But that afternoon, something invisible crossed the line between them. And lines, during war, are sacred. Their next meeting was by accident, or so they both pretended. The river ran behind the village, quiet and indifferent to flags. Elise often walked there at dusk to escape the suffocating weight of watchful eyes. He was already there one evening, cap in hand, no soldiers, no witnesses. "You shouldn't be seen with me," she said. "You shouldn't be speaking to me at all," he replied. Yet neither walked away. Conversations began carefully, about the river, about the cold, about how strange it was that life continued, birds migrating, crops growing, while Europe burned. He told her he had studied engineering before the war, that he once dreamed of building bridges, not guarding them. She told him she had dreamed of leaving the village one day, seeing Paris alive, not occupied. Each confession felt like treason, because war reduces people to symbols, uniforms, flags, enemies. But standing by that river, they weren't symbols. They were two young people trapped inside history. And proximity is a dangerous thing. He began finding reasons to patrol near her street. She began timing her walks to dusk. At first, they never touched. Distance felt safer, more moral, but war compresses time. What might have taken years in peace took weeks under occupation, because when tomorrow isn't promised, hesitation feels foolish. The first time his hand brushed hers, it was accidental. The second time, it wasn't. And that's when the village began to notice. Whispers spread. A look held too long in the square. A shadow near her door after curfew. A neighbor who saw more than she should have. In occupied France, love was not romantic. It was political. And if discovered, it was punishable. But the real danger wasn't the village. It wasn't even the German command. It was the resistance. Because somewhere in the dark, someone had started watching them. And someone had already decided that Captain Lucas Reinhardt was going to die. At first, Elise told herself it wasn't love. It was proximity. War compresses distance. It forces strangers into each other's shadows. It makes the abnormal feel temporary, survivable. That's what she repeated in the dark. But repetition doesn't make something true. Every time she heard German boots in the street, her chest tightened. Not from fear alone, but from the possibility that one pair of footsteps might be his. And that terrified her more than the occupation itself, because fear of the enemy was simple. This wasn't. She began dividing herself into two versions. One walked proudly through the village square, jaw set, eyes hard, refusing to bow her head when soldiers passed. The other waited for dusk, waited for the river, waited for him. She hated that second version. She despised the warmth in her stomach when he spoke her name softly, without rank, without command. She resented how he listened, truly listened, when she talked about her mother, who had died years before the war, about her childhood dreams of leaving the village. The enemy was not supposed to feel human. He was not supposed to confess that he feared what his country was becoming. He was not supposed to admit that sometimes, at night, he lay awake wondering whether obedience and guilt could coexist. "You think I don't see what this uniform means?" he asked her once, voice low, almost defensive. "I try not to," she replied. But that was the problem. She was trying not to imagine him without the insignia on his collar, trying not to picture a future where there were no checkpoints, no curfews, no whispers, trying not to feel relief when he was near. And the guilt was relentless. When her neighbors stood in bread lines, hungry and humiliated, she felt it. When a young man from the village disappeared after being suspected of resistance ties, she felt it. When German trucks carried away confiscated supplies, she felt it like a stain spreading beneath her skin. Was she betraying them just by loving him? Or was she betraying herself by pretending she didn't? Her father noticed the change first. "You're quieter," Henri observed one evening, not looking up from the small repair he was making. "Everyone is," she replied. But he knew silence has different textures. "Yours is not fear," he almost said. "It's conflict." One night, after meeting Lucas beneath the bridge, she returned home shaking. Not from cold, from realization. If the resistance discovered them, they would not ask questions. They would not care about nuance or hesitation or the way his hand trembled slightly when he removed his gloves. They would see a German officer, and she would be seen beside him. That was enough. "Do you ever think about what happens after this?" she asked him once. "After the war?" He didn't answer immediately. "Engineers plan for stability," he said finally, "not for collapse." "That's not an answer." "No," he admitted. "It's not," because deep down, they both understood something neither dared to say aloud. This love had an expiration date. War does not allow neutral spaces. Eventually, everyone must choose a side, and she was running out of time. Each meeting felt heavier than the last, not sweeter, heavier, like holding something fragile over a precipice. She began to notice details she had ignored before, the sharp lines of his uniform, the cold efficiency in his posture when soldiers saluted him, the way villagers lowered their eyes in his presence. He belonged to the machine occupying her home, no matter how gently he touched her, no matter how softly he spoke. One evening, as they stood too close beneath the dim cover of trees, she whispered something she had been afraid to admit. "If they make me choose," she said, barely audible, "I don't know what I'll do." For the first time, real fear crossed his face. Not fear of death, fear of being the reason she had to decide. And somewhere in the dark, beyond the river, beyond the fragile illusion they had built between them, someone was already forcing that choice. The rain started without warning. Not a storm, just a cold, steady fall that turned the dirt roads into dark veins of mud and swallowed sound before it could travel. Elise knew something was wrong the moment she saw the bakery shutters half closed before sunset. Too early, too deliberate. Then she heard it. Not gunfire. Whispers. Two men under the awning across the square, faces tense, shoulders stiff. Tonight, near the bridge. Alone. Her blood turned to ice. They never said his name. They didn't have to. She walked past them slowly, pretending not to hear. Every instinct screamed at her to run immediately, but fear makes you careful before it makes you fast. When she reached the corner, she ran. Her breath burned in her lungs as rain soaked through her dress. The village felt different, charged, like the air before lightning strikes. Windows were darker than usual, doors closed tighter. The resistance had chosen their moment well. Curfew would empty the streets. The river would swallow the noise, and a German officer walking alone would not raise suspicion until morning. She burst through her front door, nearly slipping on the stone floor. Her father looked up instantly. "What happened?" She couldn't form the words at first. "They're going to kill him." Henri didn't ask who. He knew. Silence stretched between them, heavy, final. "If you leave now," he said slowly, "you are choosing." "I know. And you may not be able to undo it." "I know." The hardest part wasn't the decision. It was knowing that whatever she did next would define her forever. She turned and ran again. The path to the bridge cut through a narrow line of trees. Mud clung to her shoes, slowing her. The rain intensified, needling her face, blurring her vision. Every second felt stolen. Every second felt too late. As she reached the edge of the trees, she saw him, a dark figure walking toward the bridge, alone, cap pulled low, steady stride. For one suspended moment, she almost stopped, because if she called out his name, everything would unravel. If someone was watching, and someone always was, her warning would expose her. But if she stayed silent, he stepped onto the bridge, and shadows moved, 3 of them, from behind the stone wall, from the riverbank, from the trees opposite her. It happened fast. A shout in French. "Now!" Gunfire shattered the night. The first shot missed. The second didn't. Lucas staggered. Not dramatically. Not like in stories. Just a sharp, stunned recoil, as if his body needed time to understand betrayal. Elise screamed. The sound tore out of her before she could stop it. Every head turned. For one fraction of a second, his eyes found hers across the rain-soaked distance. No anger, no accusation, just understanding, and something like regret. Another shot. His body fell against the stone railing, then over it. The splash was louder than the gunfire. The resistance fighters scattered instantly, disappearing into darkness trained by months of secrecy. Elise stumbled forward onto the bridge, slipping, falling to her knees near the edge. The river below churned violently, black and merciless. "Lucas!" she gasped, the name no longer forbidden. No answer, only the current. Footsteps echoed in the distance. German patrols responding too late. She forced herself up and ran back into the trees before the soldiers could see her. Her mind was no longer divided, no longer conflicted. It was empty, because the choice had been made, and it hadn't been hers. By morning, the official version was clear: a heroic German officer ambushed by terrorists. But the village version was different. They remembered the scream. They remembered who it came from. And when his body surfaced downstream at dawn, so did the rumors. But what no one saw, what no one could possibly know, was that just hours earlier, before he left his quarters, he had already written the letter, and he had known. 30 years later, the bridge no longer looked the same. The war had ended. Borders had shifted. Children played in streets that once echoed with boots and gunfire. The river still flowed beneath the stone arches, indifferent as ever, carrying leaves instead of secrets. No plaque marked the spot where Captain Lucas Reinhardt fell. No record mentioned Elise Martin in any official archive of heroes or traitors. History had moved on, but memory had not. In the spring of 1976, a young historian researching personal correspondence from German officers during World War II uncovered a thin folder misfiled in a Munich archive. Inside were routine military reports, patrol logs, supply requests, and one sealed envelope, unsent, addressed only with a first name, Elise. The handwriting matched the single line found decades earlier on her doorstep. But this letter was longer. It had never reached her. In it, Lucas wrote about doubt, about disillusionment, about realizing that loyalty enforced by fear was not loyalty at all. He admitted he had been approached by members of the French resistance weeks before his death. They had made him an offer, information in exchange for safe passage when the war ended. He never wrote whether he accepted. The final paragraph was incomplete, as if interrupted. "If they discover what I intend to do, I will not survive the week. But if I do nothing, I lose something far greater than my life." The sentence ended there. No signature, no explanation. The historian attempted to trace Elise Martin. It took months. She had left the village in 1946, moved south, worked quietly as a seamstress, never married, no children, no public record of political affiliation, no documented accusations after the public humiliation. When he finally located her, she was living alone in a small apartment overlooking another river, smaller, quieter. He asked her one question: did he betray Germany? She looked at him for a long time before answering. "Everyone betrayed something during the war," she said softly. "Some betrayed their country, some betrayed their conscience, some betrayed their hearts. That's not what I asked." A faint smile touched her lips. "You're asking the wrong question. And what is the right one?" She turned toward the window, watching the water move steadily beyond the glass. "The right question," she said, "is whether love counts as betrayal when the world itself has lost its mind." She never confirmed whether she warned the resistance. She never confirmed whether Lucas had agreed to help them. She never denied loving him. When she died a few years later, her belongings were modest: clothing, photographs of her parents, a small wooden box. Inside the box was the original note found on her doorstep the morning his body surfaced. The ink had faded slightly, but the words remained clear. "If loving you is betrayal, then let history judge me." History never did. It judged nations. It judged leaders. It judged armies. But it never fully judged two young people who met by a river while Europe burned. Some in the village still insist she was a collaborator. Others whisper that she may have saved lives by influencing a German officer who had begun to question orders. The truth lies somewhere beneath the surface, like a body carried by current, visible only for a moment before sinking again. If you stand on that bridge today, you won't see ghosts. You'll see water, moving forward, always forward. But if you listen closely, especially at dusk, when the air grows heavy and the world feels suspended between light and dark, you might understand something the war could never erase. Love does not obey flags, and sometimes the bravest rebellion is not pulling a trigger, but daring to feel in a time designed to make you numb. The river remembers. Whether it forgives, that part remains a mystery.